A few weeks ago, or possibly several weeks ago since my turnaround time on videos is kinda slow, Sensei Seth made a video in which he tried to learn Canelo's head movement in a week. It's a great video, go watch it, but spoiler alert, he obviously failed. And this isn't just because he only gave himself a week, but it's also because he never actually addressed how Canelo uses head movement. You see, Seth spent a week drilling basic slips, but as I explained in my video on fundamentals, those technical details don't matter all that much. Canelo isn't a master of head movement because of his precise form. He does have precise form, but that's not actually what makes him great. You see, head movement by itself doesn't do much. What matters is how that head movement improves your positioning and is incorporated into your strategy. By bending at the waist when his opponent begins their offense, he crowds them and essentially forces them to punch at their belly button. This creates an awkward punching angle and prevents his opponents from continuing their advance, as continuing to move into Canelo's head will only make the punching angle more awkward. However, this move typically only buys him a second or two before his opponent makes the adjustment to start throwing uppercuts and bolo punches. At the first sign his opponent is adjusting, Canelo immediately initiates a hard pull and hides behind his lead shoulder. By leaning forward and then quickly leaning back, Canelo creates the illusion that he's moved a considerable distance almost instantly, even if his feet have moved very little. This screws with his opponent's perception of distance and makes it very difficult for them to target his head, which allows him time to force a reset. Now, if his opponent does manage to track his head movement after the pull, Canelo rolls the punch and initiates a matrix step. A matrix step is when you turn towards your inside before stepping towards your outside with your lead leg. Kind of like you're doing a haggler shift and then shuffling backwards. It's a super awkward motion, but its weirdness means that it's really hard to predict and track. And because it's typically used while shoulder rolling across, Canelo's able to move away from both of his opponent's hands. Now, bending at the waist to pull to matrix step is a great combo, but it can actually run you into trouble against southpaws, because an open stance inherently creates more distance between rear hands. And bending at the waist in an open stance can put you dangerously close to your opponent's rear uppercut. It's also a bit harder to use the Philly shell to hide behind your lead shoulder, because their cross and rear uppercut can pretty easily get around that shoulder. Canelo instead prefers to use his tactic of bending at the waist to bait a strike, which he then slips by moving his head to the outside and then stepping into the outside foot position. By following this up with a quarter turn, he has now taken the outside foot position and a dominant angle by distracting his opponent with a tempting uppercut. Canelo also uses these patterns of head movement to launch his own offense. When his opponents lower their hands to uppercut his low crouch, he comes up with an uppercut of his own, having used his head to gain control of the inside. He's also able to use a pull counter after both his pull and his matrix step, punishing any opponent that gets overly aggressive. And of course, the dominant angle he takes against southpaws allows him a moment to throw whatever he wants. The key takeaway from Canelo's head movement is not he practices slipping a lot. It's that he uses a low crouch and a pull to manipulate distance, and uses the matrix step and a quarter turn to routinely cut an angle to his outside. Canelo is a master of head movement because of how he uses it to adjust his position. Note that this is not at all a thorough breakdown of Canelo's strategy. These are just some of the insights I gained by watching a couple minutes of a Canelo head movement highlight reel. So don't spam comments talking about, why didn't you talk about this part of his game? If you want me to make a more in-depth breakdown, I'll think about it. I don't know. I would love to see a video in which Seth tries to implement the same overall strategy of using head movement to manipulate distance and initiate angle cuts to his outside instead of just drilling basic slips over and over. And it would be very interesting to see which kind of approach works better. Oh, but armchair violence, why don't you do that kind of training for a week and see how it goes? See the part of my name that says armchair violence? That's there for a reason. Ultimately, Canelo does not just sit there and slip punches like a metronome. If Sensei Seth mimicked the way Canelo uses head movement, he could have gotten some interesting results. And I know I'm kind of criticizing a portion of Seth's fighting, but he can definitely beat me up, so it's okay. So the next time we see each other at Icy Mike's gym, he'll get his revenge. But if he gets his revenge while using Canelo-esque head movement, then who really won?
Look at this kid, he's an idiot. I bet that he can't even fight. Cause my Krav Maga skills could totally kill. Only my school does martial arts right.